My sewing mojo has left me. After being in South Africa for almost 2 months, I have only done 2 things. And there are quite a few things that I've brought along and that I've been wanting to work on, but I just can't get myself to get going. So, after traveling for almost 2 months and being on the road for the last year, I've realized that you actually need good equipment. This little sewing machine is ancient, but it works like a dream. But I've had other machines that are newer or older that was horrible. And today, on this rainy Sunday, I'm going to take you along on the process of finding my sewing mojo and making a dress for my friend. The light is really not great today. As you can see, it is so stormy. I love it. So I need to sew, and for that reason, I'm going to move this place around so it works for me. Time for a break. These are the most amazing nachos. I don't remember what you call it in other countries. It's clementines, I think. They are so sweet. They do have quite a lot of pips, but I still love them. And I just follow the pips. They come out anyway. So, I am setting up so I can work. And this couch is going out. My friend got another one. I think they're coming to fetch it this week sometime. So I've moved it out of the way. And now I have space over there to work and to sew. Every sewing project starts with cutting out. So yesterday, while my friend was in town, I cleared her kitchen and I cut out on her kitchen counter. The nice part of that was that it was the right height. And that's something that I've also learned in the last year and a half of traveling. It's so much easier to cut out if you have something that's waist height instead of crawling around on the floor. My friend has this dress that she loves, and I am going to copy it for her on this fabric. First step is to turn it inside out, grab the sleeves, and make half of the pattern like this. I folded the sleeve in so then I can see where the underarm line goes or seam goes, and I am going to, when I get to that, just fold that in so I can cut there. It also has a pleat down the front, so I'll just fold that in, and then I use just whatever I can find as pattern weights. I'm in the kitchen at the moment, so that is why we are using kitchen things. I am also going to cut it straight to here and then just give it a seam down the front because it has a fold, as you can see there, and that will hide the seam. I then cut it out with a centimeter seam allowance because I'm going to make this dress on the overlocker mostly. And then I followed the sleeve as it is to cut out the new sleeve. I've folded the back now and I'm ready to cut. And then I've cut out the sleeve already and I'm just going to do another one on that fabric. I give about a centimeter extra when I cut out, just for seam allowance and to play with in case there's a problem. And here at the top, it folds over about a centimeter, so I've left a finger width. Finger is usually a centimeter wide, and I'm just going to cut it straight and then cut the sleeve part. So we want a centimeter, and I've done about 2 centimeters there. Okay, now I'm happy. Perfect. And I need to cut one more sleeve. And then I can start sewing. Well, this neck arm line doesn't look exactly right, so let's just shape it properly. And then for the second sleeve, I'm going to try and get it out over here. With sleeves, don't be afraid to cut them one at a time and to open your fabric if you need to. Sometimes we're so set on the idea that we have to cut them together, and it's not necessary. As long as you remember to keep wrong sides together or right sides together, you should be fine. My next step is to take the back and put the little binding on the neck. When I do the neck, I like to sew it down overlock it, and then I unpick the sewing because I don't want too much of a seam in the back. And another thing why I'm doing it this time is I cut my binding a bit narrow. So this way it actually broadens my binding a bit. And then also when I sew it down, it's not so wide. Like there, if I've pulled it over, it's narrow, but that piece that I'm going to sew down, because I like to just top stitch it down, that's actually quite wide. While if I just do the overlocking, I can actually sew it on the edge and it looks like it's part of the whole design. I then ironed the violin onto the facing. Okay, this is a day and a half later, and this is the reason why you do not postpone. Do you hear that sound outside? I'm going to open the window so you can hear properly. That's generators. This little village has been without power for 48 hours, maybe longer. Because of the storm, some power lines had trees on them, and some other power boxes exploded, and it somehow flooded. So it's been chaos. And here's the lesson I'm learning. Do the work when you have power, especially when you're in South Africa. I've overlocked the front together, and I'm now going to put in the pleat. And then I've also ironed on the interfacing onto the facing, and I will do that part now. Next step is to see where the facing ends, and then I will just sew it together. And for the pleat, I will go down So the next step is to put the facing in place. So I've started in the middle, and then I just fill in all the pins until I've pinned it completely. And now I'm going to sew it with a centimeter seam allowance. And then I'm going to clip it there, and then I can fold it. And I will do my understitching over on this side, a millimeter from the side. The next step is to overlock my facing on the edge so it does not unravel. Now it's time for the shoulder seams. So I've taken my back and my front, right sides together, and then I take my facing and I fold it over the back. And now I'm just going to overlock the shoulder seam together. The shoulder seam has been done. I'll cut off the excess, but then when you fold it over, it makes the neck like that. And I will just iron it flat afterwards. I still have to go in there and just cut off the excess in that corner. The sun just came out, and it's so beautiful after so many days of rain. But I'm now at that point where I don't feel like continuing. I fitted it. It does fit. I just need to cut off a little bit and actually put the sleeves in, and then it's done. And I'm actually done now. And that's part of the problem. When your sewing mojo is gone, usually I can push through because it's so close to being done. But I really struggle with that at the moment. When I get to that point where I'm done for the day, I'm done and nothing can convince me to get going. So I'm going to use the fact that the light is going as my excuse to stop sewing now. I'll see you tomorrow morning. Good morning. I have no power. Today is Friday. We got power on Thursday afternoon, and now we're without power again. Look at this. Wow, this is actually quite wild, but not as wild as it was. And this is what it looks like. The end tail of the cyclone is hitting us now. I told you in the beginning of this video that my sewing mojo left me. Totally gone. It was like when I landed in South Africa, I just didn't want to sew. But I realized I was sick for almost 4.5 weeks. I think I had some really horrible flu. I did get that eye infection. And in between, I've moved so many times, I've stopped counting. And so, as I'm talking through the whole thing of the sewing mojo, what I am finding, ooh, it looks like there's light. Wait, let's go and see if there's light. Ooh, I think we have light. Oh, look at that. Continuing on the sewing mojo saga. You can't sew if there's no electricity. I know, it's obvious. That really influenced the way you plan and the way you sew. So when I was in my own house, when I was living here, I was able to plan around this power outages because they were usually kind of planned. You didn't always know if they were going to stick to the plan, but at least there was some form of plan. So what would happen when the power was out, I would go and cut out my orders, and maybe hang the washing, but there was always something that had to be done while there was no power. And I made it work, and it was extremely tiring, but there was a strategy and I could stick to it. But this time around, being back here, there is no plan and there's no schedule. And so that's another thing I'm learning about Sewing MoJO. It does help if you have a schedule that you can stick to. Even if your schedule means you say, I'm going to sew every morning before work for half an hour. It can be difficult if you don't have a set space to sew, but you might make it work. Another option could be to say, on a Sunday afternoon, I'm not available. I know my one friend, she actually switched her phone off, locks her door, and unplugs the battery for the doorbell because that 5 hours or 4 hours is her sewing time. I am not in a position here to do that because it's friends and it's traveling and changing houses. So for me, what I'm learning while traveling and trying to get sewing done is I need to grab the moment when it lasts. There was a famous moment when I said, I'm actually done now. I'm going to use the fact that the light is going as my excuse to stop sewing. So for me, I need to grab it, and I'm going to grab it now because there is my fabric and here is my sewing machine and there is some power. So let's get sewing again. As I click this machine on, please go and click on the like button. I would really appreciate some likes. Let's continue on the sewing process. Oh, this looks like my scraps. I had to cut off some pieces because it was too big in some parts. I haven't done that yet. And that's also, I could have done that while I didn't have power and I just didn't do it. So something else I'm learning about Sewing MoJO and getting stuff done, even if you don't feel like it, is maybe make a list of the things that needs to be done. If I had a list, say on my phone, telling me, remember to cut all the excess off where the pins are or something similar, I would have done it by now when the power was off. But I was just sitting there fretting, and maybe that's something else with Sewing MoJO. Calm down. Have a breath. Deep in. Another breath in. And breathe out. Simple. But that breath actually grounds you, and I often forget about it. Okay, let's keep sewing. First step, cut off the excess. Finally, the sleeve is going in. Now, if you've stuck around for all this goes up until now and you're not subscribed, maybe you like this time. Oh, my power just went off again. Am I laughing or am I crying? I don't know. Maybe you like this type of chaos, and maybe you should subscribe. I'm going to see you later when I have power again. But before I go, let's pin the sleeve into the armhole, that when there's power again, that we can actually sew. The power is back, so let's grab this moment while it lasts and quickly sew the sleeves in. Because I don't know for how long we still will have power. I like to sew the sleeve in and then overlock it because that way I can actually manage the gathers on the sleeve cap much better. Oh my goodness, don't you just love the sound of this machine? It purrs like a kitten. You really don't get this type of machines anymore. They are just so resilient. It's a Bernina 830 or Bernina Record. Maybe some of you sewing machine fundies out there could tell me which year it was made. Oh, I would actually really be interested if you know. So Bernina Record, and it's made in Switzerland, and its number is 830. If you know which year it was made, I would really love to know. But just look how nice it is sewing. And now I will go and overlock it. And when I overlock the sleeve, I make sure my right hand needle is catching where I sew. I will just go and unpick that little piece there. But for the rest, it's all covered with overlocking stitch. And now let's do the other one. I then sat down and overlocked the second sleeve, and after that I overlocked the side seams together. I need to go and fit, but I want to quickly sew the facing down. I don't always do it, but because it's got this pleat down the front, by sewing down the facing, it will keep the pleat in place. So I'm just going to do that, and then I'm going to go to my friend downstairs and ask her to fit. Okay, we fitted, it fits beautifully, but this sleeve is that much too wide. And it fits very nicely over here, so I can't just sew it down all the way. So I need to unpick the sleeve and cut them smaller and then put them in again. But it's quite a little bit gathered on the shoulders, so I will just take the ease out from there and move it all down. So let's unpick. So my friend is still sleeping and I do not want to wake her up. So I won't be cutting in a beautiful kitchen this morning. I have just put it all on the floor and I'm just cutting off all the excess. What I did is I pinned the sides together, so I'm just cutting it all at once. And now I have pinned, I'm too old for this. Oh my goodness. I think I need to do more Pilates. Then I've pinned the shoulders and I'm now just going to cut them. Again, the same principle, pin the two shoulder seams together, cut where I made marks for it to be changed for the armholes. The sleeves are pinned back in place. So another reason why I need to get this done is because I'm leaving here in 2 days' time and it's the old story of my life. Let's rush to get things done. And maybe that's also a way of getting your motivation going, is by putting yourself under pressure. And I find I often put myself under pressure to get the jobs done. So part of the pressure is these machines need to go back to my friends where I borrowed them from before I leave. So maybe that's a good motivation for Sewing MoJO. Overlocking is done. Last step is the hem. I'm putting in a hem, I'm folding it over just a centimeter and then pulling it and sewing on the right side because I'm using a twin needle. Now the nice thing, when you overlock the bottom, when you pull it, it actually, you can see a ridge on this side, and that's what I use to guide me. And then I use my line on this side on my plate, and then I can put a hem in without putting pins. And I just pull the fabric a little bit while I go, because afterwards I will just steam it flat and then it's ready. This is the key to perfection. There's my wobbly hem, and I just iron it with a lot of steam, and it goes and it lays flat. It is tempting to not do this, to just say it's good enough and I'm moving on to the next thing. But I don't do that, because I believe that if I've spent so much time making something, then I can take that little bit of extra time and make sure that it's as perfect as I can give it. And the next point, I really don't want my things to look homemade. And this is one of the points that can turn it from homemade to looking professional. The dress is finished and my friend loves it. She loves the v-neck, she loves the pleat up here, and she also loves the length. And as you can see, all the seams and hems that were pulling up and being frilly are now flat after I've ironed it. Getting back to what I spoke to you about in the beginning of losing my Sewing MoJO, I've learned a few things. For Sewing MoJO to be there constantly, it does help if you have a good place to cut out, if you have enough light, if you have power, if you have the right machines to work with, and machines that does not bungle up at the bottom. And my previous self was sometimes a bit critical. After this whole experience and me taking almost 2 weeks to do this one simple dress, I have more grace, not just for myself, but also for each of you who sometimes just don't get the stuff done because it's hard. It is some of the best feelings when you get something done and it is the way you imagine it, or you made it for somebody else and they love it. But there are times when it doesn't get out like that, when you actually come out with something that is terrible. That's also okay. So the biggest thing that I'm taking away from this experience, besides the stress, sewing is a process and it's a hard process. But just like sewing sometimes does not get done, and it's okay. It's sometimes also okay to just give ourselves grace and say, I'm not doing X, Y, and Z. And circumstances might be part of it. But maybe you are just overwhelmed and tired. And today, my message to all of you, my fellow sewing adventurers, is grace is not just a person. Sometimes you have to give it to yourself. On that note, I'm going to say goodbye. And if you want to see where I bought this fabric, then click on the link to this video.